You might have never heard of Åland unless you live in Scandinavia or have a specific interest in the region. Even if the name has crossed your path, chances are you don't know much about this place. That's pretty common for most folks around the globe. Åland is an autonomous nation, but its presence and features are pretty much unknown to the majority. Even in Europe, Åland remains a mystery for many. It's actually an independent country with its own flag, national anthem, and parliamentary body. So, let's dive into this lesser-known territory. Åland is an island nation of strategic importance in the Baltic Sea, situated at the entrance of the Gulf of Bothnia between Sweden and Finland. That's where the capital, Mariehamn, is located. The most populous island is 170 kilometers from the Finnish coast and 50 kilometers from the Swedish coast. Åland plays a crucial role as a connecting point between these two nations. The territory consists of about 6,500 islands and rocky formations, with approximately 60 of them inhabited. In total, the area of all the islands adds up to around 1,600 kilometers, with a population of 30,000 residents. Although it's part of Finland, Swedish is the official language in Åland, used by 93.5% of the local population. The folks in Åland, descendants of ancient Vikings, were converted to Christianity by Swedish missionaries in the 12th century, leading to their integration into the country. After a remarkable naval victory over Sweden, the islands were conquered by the Russian Tsar Peter I in 1714 and became a Russian forward operating base. When Finland declared independence from the Russian Empire in 1917, folks in Åland were itching to carve out their own path, with backing from the Swedes. That's because, back then and even now, Åland had a hefty population of Swedish descendants who were keen on maybe cozying up to Sweden. Though the Finns were okay with giving the islands some autonomy, they were dead set against full-on independence for Åland. That sparked a real doozy of an international crisis back then. After World War I wrapped up, the League of Nations swooped in to sort out squabbles between nations in a more chill way, laying the groundwork for today's United Nations. Åland's crisis between Sweden and Finland was the League's first big litmus test. The League's call was for the islands to stay under Finnish rule, but with a hefty dose of autonomy. They decided Åland would be run by its own separate administration and kept free from military stuff, like no military bases allowed. On May 6, 1920, Finland officially gave the nod to Åland's autonomy, letting them set up their own parliament. Even though they're technically part of Finland, Åland flies its own flag, belts out its own anthem, rocks its own constitution, and runs its own show in terms of governance. Swedish got the nod for official language instead of Finnish. Åland's parliament calls the shots on home turf matters and even gets a say in stuff outside its borders. When Finland jumped aboard the European Union train in 1995, Åland held its own little vote about joining, ending up in the EU through a separate, clear-cut deal, unlike Finland's process. As its own state entity, Åland is a Nordic Council associate member and runs its own police force and postal system. Their decisions and how they roll them out cover lots of ground, from health and education to getting around. One standout thing is Åland folks are off the hook for military service. While Finland's hailed as the happiest place on earth, Åland outshines Finland's national average on pretty much every happiness and well-being scale. People on the islands also tend to live longer than mainlanders, making for a healthier bunch. Before they became a Russian hotspot, these islands were pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Since then, they've urbanized based on their geographic spread. The most populated city was set up by Russian Tsar Alexander II in 1861, named after his wife, Empress Maria. Just like in a lot of ancient Viking communities, sailing and fishing were the main gigs in Åland. Today, half of the country's economy rides on maritime activities. One of the big tourist spots is the Maritime Museum, where you can find ancient Arabic coins proving the locals were doing business with far-off places way back when. Agriculture's a big deal in the economy, too. The breathtaking archipelago landscape south of the Scandinavian map is the first thing folks mention when they visit Åland. With a climate that's a bit different from Sweden and Finland, From May to August, it's one of the sunniest spots in Scandinavia. And one of the gems in that scenery is top-notch honey, made by bees feasting on all sorts of flowers. Plus, apples are a big deal in Åland's agricultural scene. Åland's known as Finland's top apple producer, thanks to its longer days and more sun exposure, making for juicier, tastier apples. Plus, Finland's oldest chip factory calls Åland home, while Finland's been killing it in the software game, especially with mobile apps and games. Åland seems to be following suit. The software and gaming scene there's blowing up fast with big plans in the works and government programs to boost it even more. Åland's got its own slice of the internet, with websites rocking the PAX extension, all representing the country. When Åland hopped on the EU train in '95 through a separate deal from Finland, one perk was dodging those EU customs and tax rules, which would have hit the maritime industry hard. A major cash flow for the country. Every day, passenger ships from Sweden, Finland, and Estonia pull into Åland, with loads of folks looking to snag some tax-free goods. Even though Åland's got low unemployment, essentials tend to run pricier than on the mainland, a typical island gig. Meanwhile, over in Sweden, homeschooling's been a hot topic, especially during the pandemic. Even though it's been a global thing during this time, the Swedish government's holding tight against homeschooling, saying it weakens social ties and democratic tradition. Meanwhile, back in Finland, homeschooling is an option for families who dig that vibe. Since Swedish is the official language in Åland, it's also the language used in the education system. After Sweden banned homeschooling in 2011, some Swedish families who were all about it decided to pack up and move to Åland. Like in a lot of autonomous regions, separatist movements popped up in Åland too, led by the Future of Åland political party, aiming for full-on independence. Since the 2000s, this party's been snagging seats in the parliament, which has 30 spots. Over in Åland, it's pretty common to have summer houses, and during the warmer months, especially in the capital, Mariehamn, folks opt to shack up in those to soak up some peace and nature vibes. In Åland, there's a rule that lets you camp pretty much anywhere, as long as it's just for a couple of nights, you're not setting anything on fire, and you keep a respectful distance from private property. That gives folks the freedom to pitch tents and camp out while visiting, drawing in a bunch of nature lovers. Because it's small and spread out across islands, social life in Åland's pretty low-key, with Mariehamn being the liveliest spot, boasting a population of 11,500. On weekends, a bunch of locals head over to Stockholm for some city fun. With settlements being small, public transport in Åland's free, open to both locals and tourists. Some routes even connect cities, even in the most remote spots. Åland even has its own license plate system. Impressed by this tiny Scandinavian gem? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content.